Chapter 5 Dusk. Norman Gotsby sat on a bench in Hyde Park in the city of London. It was some 30 minutes past 6 on an early March evening, and dusk had fallen. There was still some light from the moon and many street lamps. Some people moved silently along the path in the park. Others sat on the benches. Gotsby sat observing them and wondering if they were as unhappy as he was. On the bench by his side sat an elderly gentleman. Gotsby observed him quietly. His clothes could scarcely be called shabby, but he looked poor and troubled. He was probably worried about bills that had to be paid. After some time, the old man got up and slowly walked away into the grey light. His place on the bench was taken almost immediately by a young man, fairly well dressed, but slightly more cheerful than his predecessor. As if to emphasize the fact that the world went badly with him, the young man sighed as he flung himself into the seat.
"You don't seem in a very good temper,"
said Gotsby, judging that he was expected to take due notice of the demonstration. The young man turned to Gotsby to share with him the details which put him instantly on his guard.
"You wouldn't be in a good temper if you were in the trouble I am in," he said. "I've done the silliest thing I have ever done in my life." "Yes?"
said Gotsby coldly.
"I came to London this afternoon, meaning to stay at a hotel,"
continued the young man.
"When I got there, I found it had been pulled down some weeks ago, and a cinema theatre built up on the site. The taxi driver suggested another hotel some way off, and I went there. I just sent a letter to my people, giving them the address, and then I went to buy some soap. I had forgotten to pack any, and I hate using hotel soap. Then I walked about a bit and looked at the shops. When I came to turn my steps back to the hotel, I suddenly realized that I didn't remember its name or even what road it was in. There's a nice mess for a fellow who hasn't any friends or connections in London. Of course I can call my people for the address, but they won't have got my letter till tomorrow. Meantime, I'm without any money and nowhere to go for the night."
There was a pause after the story had been told.
"I suppose you think I've spun you rather an impossible yarn,"
said the young man, with a suggestion of bitterness in his voice.
"Not at all impossible,"
said Gotsby. The young man looked glum and said, "Unless I can find some decent person to believe my story and lend me some money, I will have to sleep on the bench."
"I'm glad, anyhow, that you don't think the story untrue."
He threw a good deal of warmth into the last sentence, as though perhaps to indicate that Gotsby could help him.
"Of course,"
said Gotsby slowly,
"the weak point of your story is that you can't produce the soap."
The young man sat forward hurriedly, felt rapidly in the pockets of his overcoat, and then jumped to his feet.
"I must have lost it,"
he said angrily.
"To lose a hotel and a cake of soap on one afternoon suggests carelessness,"
said Gotsby, but the young man hardly waited to hear the end of the remark. He rushed away down the path, his head held high.
"It was a pity,"
thought Gotsby.
"The going out to get one's own soap was the one convincing touch in the whole story. If he had taken the precaution of keeping a cake of soap, he would have been a genius cheat."
With that thought, Gotsby rose to go. As he did so, he exclaimed. Lying on the ground by the side of the bench was a small oval packet. It could be nothing else but a cake of soap, and it had clearly fallen out of the youth's overcoat pocket when he sat down on the seat. Gatsby picked up the soap and ran after the young man. He had nearly given up the search when he caught sight of him waiting to cross the road. He turned around when he heard Gatsby calling him. Gatsby said, holding out the cake of soap,
"It must have slipped out of your overcoat pocket when you sat down on the seat. I saw it on the ground after you left. I'm sorry, I did not believe your story. Here, take some money. Here is my card with my address,"
continued Gatsby.
"Any day this week will do for returning the money. And here is the soap. Don't lose it again. It's been a good friend to you." "Lucky thing you're finding it,"
said the youth, and then, with a word or two of thanks, he rushed away in the direction of Knightsbridge.
"Poor boy! He was about to weep,"
said Gatsby to himself.
"It's a lesson to me not to be too clever in judging by appearances."
As Gatsby was walking past the seat where the little drama had taken place, he saw an elderly gentleman poking and peering beneath it and on all sides of it, and recognized his earlier fellow occupant.
"Have you lost anything, sir?"
he asked.
"Yes, sir, a cake of soap."